Hello, this is Cletus Davis from Ultimate IT Guys, and welcome to the April edition of our Housing Authority Technology webinar. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about some tips for using Excel to help you be a little more productive, and we're going to be talking about ransomware and data breaches and just some things there to try to help you stay safe and secure as you're doing your job. First, just a quick reminder about our monthly webinar. We do some helpful quick tips. We talk about standards, security updates, various timely topics that are happening. If you want to make sure that you always get the notices of when the webinar is happening and get it to where you can have it show up in your calendar, if you will sign up for the webinar at ultimateitguys.com. There's a form right at the top part of the page that'll help you sign up for it, and you'll make sure that you get the reminders. So let's start off with talking a little bit about Excel today. There's a feature in the newer versions of Excel that most of us don't take advantage of. And it's called Excel tables. And it makes it really quick and easy to work with numbers that you might have from a report or some piece of information that you're gathering. The command to create a table is Control-T, or you can click on the table from the insert menu at the top of your, and that will turn a list like this, give you a choice here of what area you want to use to create the table. And then you'll get something that looks like this, that's nicely formatted. It already has filters on it. And it just adds some things that makes it very quick and easy. These are things you could do manually, but it does it in just one quick shot for you, which saves you time, which is a very good thing. Now, let's say we wanted to add a total row to that. Well, we could use our typical sum function or highlight all the numbers down that right column and hit the sum button, and it would sum that up. But we can also just hit Control-Shift-T, and it will actually add a row like I've highlighted there at the bottom that actually says total. It's made it bold formatting, and it's actually totaled up a column of numbers for us. So it just saves us time and makes it nicely formatted and easier to read and work with. So that's our quick tip for today on using Excel. So let's move on and talk about ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malicious software designed to block access to a system until a sum of money is paid. Well, that's the definition. We've got that out of the way. The point is, the bad guys are holding your computer or your information hostage, and they want you to give them money, usually. And that can take on a few different forms. But first, we're going to talk about just a few of the stats about ransomware. 81% of businesses have experienced a cyber attack. This is from a study that was done last summer. 66% of businesses have suffered a data breach. That's 2/3 of the people have suffered some type of a data breach. Some of those could be very small and minor. Some of them could be huge, like some of the ones we've heard on the news. 35% were victims of ransomware. That's over 1/3 of these businesses were hit by ransomware. So that's why we're talking about ransomware today. This is from a study that just was released in the last few weeks. This is from a study that Verizon does every year that has to do with security in businesses. It says ransomware was found in 39% of the malware-related data breaches. 39% doesn't sound too bad, but when you think about it, that's over 1/3 of all the data breaches and malware-related incidents. Ransomware was over 1/3 of those. Just that one type of thing. The other couple of just quick things from that, 68% of data breaches took multiple months to discover. 87% had data compromised within minutes or less of the attack taking place. So it happens very quickly, but you might not notice it for a very long time. We'll come back to that later in our discussion. Basically, there's 3 types of ransomware. There's the scareware, there's the screen browser locker, and there's the data encryptor. And we've probably seen variations of these. Most of us have. The scareware is kind of that fake antivirus or PC cleanup tool message that pretends to detect issues on your computer and demands money to clean them up. Sometimes these amounts of money could be fairly small. Sometimes they're wanting you to send them like a cash card or a prepaid debit card. Some of them do get into more things where they want you to actually pay with your credit card. Usually most of these scareware things are very easy to get rid of. Usually you can just reboot your computer and everything's fine. Most of the time they haven't actually done anything. It's really just a pop-up type message. Now the screen or browser locker is very similar to that one, but it's typically more persistent. And usually it's more like fake messages claiming that some type of illegal activity has been detected, or the IRS is after you, or FBI is after you. A lot of times they're like that, and they want you to pay them. And many of these are more persistent. In other words, you might reboot your computer and it just comes right back up. And in a lot of cases, it actually locks the screen, so you can't just shut your computer down even. You would have to like literally power it off to get it to go off. And then when it reboots, possibly the message still comes back. If you have one of these type of situations, you really should get a hold of a computer professional that can help you get that properly checked out and cleaned. The big takeaway from those first two is that you don't want to give them access to your computer, and you don't want to call the phone number that they list on there, because you're calling the bad guys and you're giving them direct access at that point, and that will lead to very bad things happening. Now I want to move on now to the data encryptor. This is typically the traditional, what we think of as ransomware. This is the thing that basically encrypts all your files, and then it demands a ransom be paid for them to give you your files back. And this is the common thing that we see usually in the news, here on the TV or the radio, them talking about a ransomware attack. It's usually this type of attack. And basically, if you think of it, they're going to take your file, and it's kind of like a zip file. They put it inside this zip file where you can't access it, and they password protect that zip file with like a really long, like 1,000-character password, so that you can't just open the file anymore. What they're trying to tell you is, well, if you'll pay us, we'll give you the password and unlock your files for you. Well, you really don't want to pay the ransom because, well, first of all, these are criminals, so there's a very good chance that even if you pay it, they're still not going to give you your files back. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we don't really want to encourage them to keep carrying out these types of attacks. If they get paid, it just encourages them to keep attacking more people. Often, they've actually seen people that have been hit with ransomware potentially will be targeted and hit again, because if they've paid the ransom, it just makes you an even bigger target. So let's look at data breaches, because data breaches are where kind of the thing that leads to these ransomware attacks happen. Basically, data breaches can be either direct or indirect. Direct would mean they got the information directly from you. Indirect means they got your information from somewhere else. And we're going to specifically be talking about indirect data breaches. That means someone else's system got hacked that had your information. These are often called a third-party compromise or attack. So what's the big deal about all of that? Well, it's because indirect victims become a direct target. The stolen information, it gets sold to hackers, often multiple times. And this happens on a black market out on the dark web. The people that, other criminals that get that information can target you for their next crime. Sometimes that might mean just gathering more information about you. Sometimes it might be ways of getting information or attacking your friends, coworkers, customers, employees. And once they understand that you work for a housing authority, they know that you have access to large amounts of personal information about a lot of people. You are a ripe target for them. Now, let's talk about some of these data breaches that happen. These are some of the people that have lost their customers' information, and it's now out on the dark web, and these bad guys are using it to target people. Places that have had these data breaches are like Sears, Kmart, Delta Airlines, Best Buy, Equifax, Panera Bread, Yahoo, Domino's Pizza. The list just goes on, and there's many more than what I have listed here on this graphic. Thing to take away is a lot of big name businesses that we deal with all the time and we give our information to all the time, they've been hit. And that means our information is out there. Data breaches have been very common. Focus on a couple of these specifically for the moment. Probably heard me gripe about Yahoo in the past. They have been hacked so many times over. Their security has just been horrendous. And over they've tried to cover up the fact that they lost information. Now let's talk about last week's example. Panera Bread gets hacked. They were told over 6 months ago that they had a problem. Their information was sitting on their website, very plainly easy to get to information, their emails, their credit card numbers, addresses, phone numbers, all of that was easily available. A security company told them they had a problem in August of last year. They did nothing. They tried to cover it up. Didn't want to do anything to fix the problem. Equifax, Experian, a couple of the credit reporting agencies, same thing. We didn't give them permission to access our data, but they have it. They actually had a vulnerability. They had been approached by security companies, by the police, and by the FBI, telling them that they had serious problems. They did nothing. And it was as simple as just applying a patch to a web server. That's all they had to do. They chose to do nothing. They lost the records of 15 million people, and that was social security numbers and dates of birth and credit histories. Very detailed information that can be used to steal your identity. That's very serious. So that's why I get so passionate about all this. We have to protect this information. And one of our industry estimate says that the number of stolen credentials now is over 8 billion records. That's billion with a B. If put that in perspective, there are only about 7 billion people on the earth. That is a lot of records that are out. It's easy to see that most people have multiple pieces of information, have been part of multiple hacks most likely, and have a lot of information that's out on the dark web for sale to criminals. Why do I care about all this? Well, let's look at the stats, let's look at the risk, and let's look at the responsibility that we have for this information. 81% of hacking-related breaches use stolen or weak passwords. That is an overwhelming stat. It's a big number. These stolen passwords that I just talked about, they're out on the dark web, they're for sale. If your information has been compromised in one of these other breaches and you haven't changed your password, or you've reused that same password at multiple sites, it's a time bomb just waiting to go off. They're going to use that. 33% of people open phishing emails. These are the emails where they're trying to scam you into giving them information, or clicking on a link, or some type of bad activity is going to happen through these phishing emails. The bad thing is that half of those 33% will do it again. That's the really scary part. Now let's look at the password thing again for a moment. This is what happens when you reuse your password. So the bad guys know that it's going to probably really difficult to break into your bank account, to your bank's website. So what do? Well, they're betting that you've probably used the same password over and over on multiple sites. So they get your information off of one of these more obscure, low-level sites that's easier to break into. Or they just buy it off of the dark web where someone else has already gone and gotten your information, your password. Now they can take that and try to break into all these other sites as you. So now, if you've reused the same password, they've got access to your network, to your social networks, to your bank. just because you use the same password over and over. That gets really scary. So big takeaway there is do not reuse your password. A few more stats here. 51% of breaches use some type of malware. 2/3 of the malware was delivered by email. 90% of the complex attacks use email as one of the steps in the attack. So we can definitely take away here that email is the preferred way of delivering malware and other attacks such as phishing. So reading your email may be the most dangerous thing that we do every day. Hackers are using email because they know that most people are using insecure email accounts such as the free email from your internet provider. And these accounts don't have any scanning or filtering to remove malware, spam, or phishing sites. So it puts you at a higher risk. Now the good news is 95% of breaches could be prevented with today's technology. I've even read some articles in the last few days that says that number's probably even higher, probably more like 97 to 98% of breaches could be prevented just by using the technology that's readily available today. What's our big takeaway? You are at risk. The information's out there. Most likely, most of us fall into one of those statistics that our information is out there. So what are we going to do? The data breaches are very common, and you've been exposed. We said a moment ago, 8 billion records of information is out. That's a lot. Let's hone in more on just the U.S. Over 73% of the people in the U.S. have some of their information for sale on the dark web. That's a lot. 7 out of 10. Also, over 18% of the U.S. population has their social security number found on the dark web. That's just crazy. And if your information is out there, you are at a much higher risk for being a target of spear phishing attacks, identity theft, ransomware, and lots of other really bad stuff that you don't want happening to you. The takeaway is you are a target. Because your information is on the dark web, you are at a much higher risk. So let's look at what we're responsible for now. Remember, we have lots of information at your housing authority. You have applicants, tenants, employees, board members, vendors, and other housing authorities that you correspond and do business with. You have a legal and ethical responsibility to protect that information and to keep it safe from the hackers and the bad guys. The problem is what I see happen so many times over and over is that some small thing happens, or we consider small, like your email getting hacked, and you do nothing. I mean, if your credit card got stolen, you would cancel it, go get a new credit card. But your email gets hacked and you just pretend like nothing ever happened. And unfortunately, that is what a lot of people do. And what they don't understand is that they're putting all of this information now at risk, as well as their other coworkers. So how do data breaches impact me? Well, here's a few of the things they can do with the information they get from a data breach. They can send spam and phishing emails pretending to be you. They often send those to the people right out of your address book, your contacts that you normally communicate with on a daily basis. So when the person on the other end receives that email, they think it's coming from you, so they probably will open it. That's a really scary thing. They can infect your computers and your network with viruses and malware. Could even be ransomware, like we're talking about today. They can steal the information that you have about other people. In other words, they can now breach the information that you have and turn around and sell that on the dark web. They can compromise your other accounts using the same login. And this is especially true if you've used the same or a really simple password. They can also use that information to steal your identity. That could take on the form of opening lines of credit, credit cards, or maybe filing a fake tax return and getting a tax refund. And now you're on the hook for it. So these are just some examples of things that they can do once they have your information. And we all know that it puts you at a much higher risk when they have your information. So let's look a little more at how these things impact us. We are at an increased risk for targeted attacks because of the dark web, phishing, and email. And we're going to dig into those three things a little deeper now. Let's first just talk about the dark web. It's a subset of the internet where many hacker communities and organized crime groups hang out. And if you've watched the TV or the news lately, you've probably heard the dark web mentioned at some point. As the name implies, there's a lot of shady stuff going on there. And it's mainly because the nature of the dark web is that everything is very anonymous. There's not really easy ways to track who you are or to know where you're coming from. And it takes very specialized software to get there. You don't just go to the dark web like you go to Google. It's a much more cumbersome process. And it does have a lot of different purposes, the dark web does, but the one we're going to very specifically be talking about here is how the hackers and the organized crime people use it to try to target you for their crimes. Almost anything is imaginable, or that is imaginable, is for sale on the dark web. But again, we're going to focus on the information that has been stolen in data breaches. That's what we want to talk about here today. The stolen information from the data breaches is for sale on the dark web. And it's things like your date of birth, your email address, your mother's maiden name, your social security number, your credit card numbers, your passwords. Those are the types of information that make up those 8 billion records that I talked about earlier. That's the kind of information that's out there that these hackers have gotten from these data breaches. As I said before, most of us have been victims. We said 8 billion records. Over 70% of the people in the U.S. have at least one piece of information for sale on the dark web. That's just staggering. And we need to know if our information's out there so we can take action to clean it up. Either change our passwords, maybe close some accounts, maybe get a new email address. Those are possible things we might want to do. But first we need to know if we've been subject to one of these data breaches. We need to know if our information's out there, and we can help you with that. But let's move on now and talk about email. If you've been a victim of a third-party data breach, you are at a much higher risk of being targeted in future attacks. I've already said this a few times. I'll probably say it a few more times because I can't say it enough. You are at a higher risk if your information is out there on the dark web. Email is the preferred way of delivering attacks. 2/3 of breach-related malware is delivered by email. 90% of the really complex attacks used email as one of the steps. A lot of the times, that email step is probably a phishing email or some type of link that would take you to a bad place and install additional things on your computer that you don't want. So email is very dangerous. Reading email is the most dangerous thing that you do. We have to be safe. Securing our email will stop the majority of these attacks if we will just properly secure our email. Now I'm going to pick on the free email here for a moment because that is where you are the most vulnerable. Using free email is like a drunk person walking through a minefield. Nothing good is going to happen there. The bad thing is that in a minefield, when someone steps on a mine, you know it right away. in the cyber security world, in the email security world, you don't necessarily know that you stepped on the mine. There may be no indication that anything bad has happened, yet in the back end, they've installed something on your computer, or they now have access to your information, or you've given them your password possibly. You gave it to them. One of the things that these bad guys have learned, they've taken a page from marketing. They figured out that if they want to know something, they just need to ask you for it and you'll give it to them. That's human nature. And that has made their job really easy. Now, what is free email? Free email is what you get from your internet provider. You're not paying for it. You might think you are, but you're really not. You're paying for internet service. And as a benefit, they're giving you this free email account. Most of those providers sell ads on those email pages where you go to view your email. Those ads contain malware. They contain viruses. They perform phishing attacks. It just puts you at such a high risk doing it that way. Plus, these free accounts don't have proper spam filtering. They don't have link scanning or any other kinds of things checking to make sure that it's okay. So let's look a little more at this. Most email threats can be easily avoided by using proper business class email, spam filtering, email link and attachment scanning, email security, and phishing site scanning. Just to make it, just kind of sum that up, it's just, let's get a proper email account and then let's check for all the bad stuff, and just don't let the bad stuff ever make it into your inbox. If you do that, you will have avoided 90% of the problems based on our statistic we looked at earlier. 90% of those threats came through via email. We can avoid the majority of these problems just by having good email practices. Well, let's talk a little bit about phishing. Again, phishing is trying to trick you or scam you into giving up information or trick you into clicking on some type of bad link. And many times we think about an email asking you to reset your password or to click on a link, and it might be coming from your internet provider, from your email provider. It looks like it is, but it's really not. It's coming from a hacker. Now, this could also be a phone call or a fake website or even a piece of just good old-fashioned paper mail asking you for information. We have to be very careful about giving out information to people that we don't truly know. If people are asking you for information, you need to think twice about it. Criminals have gotten really smart about this, and they're getting so convincing at trying to trick you into giving up your information. So how do we avoid phishing? Well, we use good old business class email again so that we stop the junk from winding up in your inbox. Well, if it's not there, you can't respond to it or click on it. If we've got good filtering in place, it's not going to let it send you to a bad website. And then just train your employees on what to be watching for, the types of things that are happening right now. That's a big part of just avoiding the problem. So if I summarize all this stuff we've talked about so far, basically it comes down to these four things. The stats show that you are at risk. Free email is dangerous. You need to know if your information is on the dark web, and don't reuse passwords. Those are your four things really to take away from today's information. So what are we going to do about these threats? Well, the first thing is you can't do the same old stuff you've always done, because what you've always done doesn't really work anymore. So the first thing is we do want to start with the basics, things like Windows updates, application updates, antivirus, backup, business email, good passwords, and user training. Those are the basics to getting you safe. And most of that is included in our normal base managed service package that we have that many of you use today. Now, there are a lot of other additional steps we could take, such as dark web monitoring and checkups, email filtering, password management, network scanning and filtering, mobile protection, security event management, and security assessments. I just want to kind of hone in on 3 of those things: the dark web monitoring, everywhere protection is what we're calling it, and then the security assessments. This is an example of a dark web monitoring report that we've ran on someone, and we can see there they had like 4 different hits, different places, different types of information. 3 of them had passwords, and 2 of them had the same password. So we're back to that thing we were talking about. Reusing passwords multiple places can get you in trouble. Using really simple or short passwords can also get you into trouble. So this is just an example of what we could find, but we know now that this person, we know where their information is, what kind of information's out there, so we were able to help them take action to make themselves safe again. Dark web monitoring plus password management is a very powerful combination for helping to keep you safe. Keeping your passwords changed and secure and proper will do a lot to help you stay secure. We're going to talk a moment about our everywhere protection. The reality today is that we're always at work. Even when we're at home or we're on the go, we access our work email on our phone or on our home computer. But if those devices aren't protected like our work computer is, then we could very well be compromised or introduce bad things into our work environment because of what we did on our mobile device or on our home computer. So with our everywhere protection, it allows you to protect up to 5 devices per user with this extra layer of protection that protects you everywhere you go. Another side benefit of this is it helps you if you're using your laptop or your tablet or whatever when you're on the road and you're at like the hotel or conference center. It actually secures your connection when you're using like public or free Wi-Fi resources, which many of you have heard me gripe about in the past. If you're using this protection, it will keep your information safe and secure even when you're using those public Wi-Fi resources. So it's a very good, very economical thing you can do to stay protected all the time. It protects, again, your work computer, your laptop, your cell phone, your home computer, your tablet, up to 5 devices per user. It costs $10 a month. So pretty economical way to protect you on all your different devices everywhere you go. Security assessment. Some of you have heard us talk about this. Some of you have even had us perform an assessment for you. Basically, it's a very detailed check of your computers and your network, checking for vulnerabilities and assessing your risk of being breached. And then that information is put back into a series of reports that help us to sit down with you and have a discussion and plan any changes that might need to happen. And the stat that's out there that we found is 9 out of 10 computer networks have potentially serious IT problems setting undetected. Sometimes it could be something really bad, like you have the hackers and the malware and stuff inside your network, but it could be something more simple and accidental, like, well, your housing software guys were in there trying to do an update to your housing software, and they were having problems, so they turned off your antivirus or they turned off the firewall on your router or something, and they never turned it back on when they were finished, and your computer's now sitting there unprotected. That's a good example of the things that are sitting there that you might not even know about or realize. And there are lots of different things that those assessments can detect and help you find, just to make sure that you're really staying safe and secure. This is an example of some personally identifiable information that was found during one of these assessments. We had, a Visa card, another payment card, a Social Security number. We're all just sitting there unprotected. This was not the information sitting inside of your housing software. These were in just plain files sitting on your computer that you probably didn't even realize were there, but yet a hacker or someone accessing your computer could have easily gotten their hands on, and you would have had a data breach. So these are just some examples of what can be found and help you deal with these issues. I'm going to go back again to more specifically how to protect myself from ransomware. Well, our very first thing is always back up your data. And you want a proper, good quality backup, not just, hey, I copy some files to a USB stick or an external hard drive. That's not really truly a backup, especially in today's world with ransomware, because most of these ransomware things can actually encrypt your backups if you're using one of these simple type methods like that for your backup. You need something that's more of a business quality backup program. A couple of other things you need to make sure that your backups are actually working. We go through and randomly restore backups for our customers just to make sure that they're actually good. Sometimes it may be backing stuff up, but it might not. It may be corrupted. You might not be able to restore it. So we like to make sure that we just periodically restore backups to make sure that they're good. The other thing is it's a good idea to go back every once in a while and just make sure you're backing up what you really intended to. I've seen this happen before. Again, I'll pick on the housing software people, but it's just an easy example to understand. They come in to do an upgrade, and they put the new version of your software in a totally different folder than it was before. So your backup is still backing up the old housing software folder, but nobody ever added the new housing software folder to the backup. So you don't really have a backup that's good now. So it's good to pay attention to your backups, to just make sure that you're backing up the right stuff, making sure you can recover it, and making sure you're backing it up with a product that's not going to fall victim to ransomware. The next one is avoid spam emails. We've talked about that a lot in here, just avoiding the phishing attacks and the spam and all that, using a good quality business email program, and doing the proper scanning and filtering on that so the junk doesn't get to your inbox. That's the best way to avoid ransomware. You want to update your operating system and all your software on a regular basis. That will help keep you safe and secure. Use good, strong passwords. That's a pretty simple one, but it's not always that easy for all of us because we have so many places. We have so many accounts. That's where a good password management program can help. And if you're interested in knowing more about that, we can help you with that. Another one, just paying attention to suspicious processes or suspicious things happening on your PC. Something looks suspicious, it probably is, and you probably should ask somebody that knows more about it. That's where we can help you with that. We're always a phone call away to help you with those type of questions. And then just use proper anti-malware software and a good firewall to just help block all that bad stuff from happening. So that's just a quick rundown of just how to stay safe from malware. And of course, in the end, just let us help you. Our standard preventative maintenance takes care of a lot of the stuff we talked about. And then we have those additional services like the business email, the network protection, the everywhere protection, dark web monitoring, and the security assessment. Those are things we can do for you to just help make sure that you stay safe.